right, a couple quick slides before I turn it over to the masters of the universe. I've been doing this now for many actually, OISs, and I always pick a topic, and so the topic tonight is going to be more around, how we look at R&D, how these individuals look at R&D from that perspective. We all know there's three quick ways to innovation. We have here is M&A, internal R&D, licensing, and partnership. And again, sorry, Ari, because you came on at the end, but I don't have B&L here. But you can see what this group here is investing in R&D from a perspective of all their portfolios. And then very interesting, we all know exactly how much it really costs to get both a device and a pharma in there. And if you look at what venture capital firms invested, they invested close to almost $3 billion in 2014. The cost to get the new drug, though, is really the challenge. We can spend money, and I think Brent was alluding to this a little earlier, and actually last week Brent and I were on a panel and talked more about it, is what's the really end result of how we get to what we want as we roll out the new products. And then from a pharma standpoint, the more we spend, the less likely we're going to be successful, it seems, in some regards, so we'll hear more about that. And then you can see here that the top quartile in both pharma and med device do stick to a very strong R&D portfolio, and they make sure that they're staying diligent, and I think, as Brent said a little earlier in his talk today, sticking to it and following through from that end. And then here's the companies. There's always going to be the outliers because of a percent of sales, but people do spend, and I'm going to ask them about, do they really fall in love with it as a percent of R&D or as a percent of sales? Is R&D a good measurement tool? And then I think I'm going to go here to my last one. You can't win. Public companies, you can't win on whatever your answer is from an R&D perspective. I'm not going to introduce this group because I've always said that if I have to introduce this group, you're either brand new to ophthalmology or you might want to consider cardiac surgery. So I'm going to go to my first question here, and I think I'm not going to look at who's sitting to my left. I'm just going to go see Jeff. This is a funny question because Brent didn't like this question last week. Do you feel R&D as a percentage of sales is a useful metric, and how do you decide when and where to invest in R&D?
So I think the R&D metric, percent of sales, is a good metric to look at. I think it's more about productivity and what you get for that spend. And I would say that at Alcon over the last 5-10 years, we haven't had as much productivity on the R&D spend as I would like to see. We spend about $1 billion a year on R&D, so about 9% of sales. If I look at Novartis more broadly, very innovation-driven company, we spend 17% of sales, or about $10 billion. On our R&D. And if I look at, your second question was, I think, more meaningful to me, which is, how do you think about making decisions around where you spend, right? And how do you allocate your money? And so we typically look at 4 filters within Alcon. The first is unmet patient need. So how significant is the patient need, and how meaningful of an impact could we have? The second filter is the science, right? How good is the science? How good are the clinical results? The third filter is the market opportunity. Is it a market that is going to have a ton of competition? Do we have a chance to be first? How's the IP? How big is the potential for the market? And then the last one is really, is it a strategic fit with our capabilities at Alcon? Is it part? Is it in line? Is it synergistic with what we do in surgical and med devices and pharma and in vision care, our 3 segments?
Ashley, J&J Vision Care looks small in relation to the total J&J business, and the entire medical device business looks somewhat challenged right now. How do you fight for R&D resourcing?
Yeah, I guess I would just build off of really what Jeff was saying. J&J, what we look at, and we've actually been in, we're probably one of the newcomers, but really an old comer, Bill and I talk about, because J&J has been in ophthalmology early on. And for us, it's really about creating value if we have value. So what we consider, unmet need, we look at strategic fit, we look at the growth opportunity, we look at the disruptions, and we look at the state of the pipeline coming. And then actually we look within J&J and say, what capabilities can we leverage to create differential value? So eye health for J&J matches all of those criteria. And I'll start really with contact lenses. We do enjoy the market-leading position in contact lenses. We've been humbled a little bit lately to my fellows over here. We're coming back. And really what we focus on is serving, customer service, serving the customer, making sure we move with the market and consumer preferences, and as we all know, really developing and implementing meaningful science and innovation. And really on all of those fronts, Jim, the power of the enterprise, the power of J&J has been a tremendous resource and support. We've increased capacity 30% over the past couple years. We've just pulled forward a launch, one of our largest launches to come, AccuView Oasis One Day, by a full year due to the enterprise's support in eye health. And that's really just to name a few. We have some of our folks here from Pharm and our cell therapy program for geographic atrophy. We were able to take advantage of our surgical expertise in J&J and bring that to bear so that we have the right delivery mechanism and the right device, and at the same time that we have the right protocols for procedural development. And that significantly de-risked the program and accelerated. So I would say that we're pretty bullish on eye health and would like to play a leadership position.
Brent, last week we were together in Irvine, and today gave a nice overview. And when you said at a CNBC interview, when you took over the Allergan name, you wanted to ensure that commitment to R&D. And Jeff addressed the question very well about the percentage of an R&D, and I know you don't see that as a direct relation to innovation. Why don't you give your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, look, I think there is no one right way of doing it. I think it's all about, output at the end of the day, right? How do you get the innovation? And so, I think my view and the view that we've taken in at Allergan is where we have a core capability in discovery, like in eye care, like in aesthetic medicine, to the extent we believe it's competitively and scientifically advantaged, we're going to invest in it, right? And we're going to make sure that it stays productive, and we're going to hold it accountable for that investment and continue to invest in it. But we're not going to do that in a mutually exclusive way. We don't have a monopoly on the best ideas, and we certainly don't have a monopoly on the best thinking. And so I'm agnostic. I don't care whether it came out of our discovery labs, somebody else is on the stage, or someone out in the audience. If it's a good idea, we're open to it. And we have a lot of capabilities in development and regulatory affairs, and certainly in commercial. And so if you have a good idea, we want to be a good home for that idea, whether it comes out of our own labs in Irvine or around the world, or from one of you guys.
Ludwin, Zeiss has R&D centers both where, I wrote here, India and China, which is interesting. So how do you measure the pace of innovation when your R&D centers are actually not here in the United States from that perspective?
Good question. In general, I would say it doesn't make a difference where it is. But let me explain why we do that. Historically, Zeiss had its R&D centers in Europe, and the largest one actually here in the United States. And that made sense because our largest markets were in Europe and here in the United States. And we like to develop our products in a certain proximity to our customers. But now the world has changed, and China has grown so much. In our last fiscal year, China actually was, in terms of revenue, country number 2. And that is why we decided to build up research and development also in China and India. Because as you all know, the requirements of products for these markets are so different, right? It's all about high patient volumes, throughput, the market is much more cost sensitive and so on. So now we have the R&D centers there. We've developed a couple of products there. We use the same metrics as we use in other places to measure the effectiveness of our R&D. It works out well.
Bill, one would say that all of your companies, every dollar is actually a spend in R&D. So why would you say that smaller company is more productive than the larger company?
Well, as many of you have heard me say before, I view our role as outsourced R&D. That's what we do, and we better do it well. And so we do think of it as innovation dollars. It's not all literally R&D dollars. But if I think about our productivity, and we try to hold ourselves accountable for this, at Versant, in the last 15 years nearly, we've invested in 20 ophthalmic companies. We've exited 10 of those now, okay? And I'm sorry, 9. 3 have failed or disappointed us, and we still have 8 in the pipeline. I did some round numbers, and we have invested not just Versant, but total investment dollars in those that have exited positively is in the $500 to $600 million range. And we've been rewarded with $4.3 billion. So you say, wow, that's pretty good. Okay, that's a good multiple. And then how much value did we deliver to the acquirer or to the public investor is part of the way we watch it as well. And we have 8 companies, quote, in the pipeline that we obviously have enough confidence in. We're still investing in them and carrying them forward. And so we don't do a compare and contrast. We just say we've got to do our job well, and if we can do it well and get in the path of progress, we can either take a company public and be rewarded in that path, or possibly sell it and partner up.
Ari, B&L Valiant's approach has been sometimes deemed as a lower risk R&D model. Can you describe that and give us a little more perspective on that?
Yeah, sure, Jim. I think the approach we take is really built around our principle of decentralization, which is a principle that operates across Valiant and within B&L. And we operate across all 4 segments: vision, care, contact lenses, and we wish you well, and we need you to be a healthy and vibrant competitor. So we have that, we have solutions, the consumer products, and then obviously pharma and surgical. And each business stands on its own merits, and it's the job of each general manager, they're all in the back, Tracy and Andy, to bring forward the business development and the R&D programs they want. We don't set a top-down number, so we evaluate programs on the merits of the value they'll bring to physicians and patients and the return on investment that we'll get, and the number rolls up to what the number will be. The other approach in terms of low risk, it's really the way we think about it is around the capabilities that we're trying to assemble. And there are times when we'll do things internally, and that includes advancing Victus, which we acquired from Brent, and we're pleased to have that platform, and Stellaris as well. And both of those surgical platforms are moving ahead with a lot of innovation internally, because we have the folks in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. Many of them have been there for 30 years. Mm-hmm. If you walk the shop floor, Brent, I'm sure you did, there are people there that feel tremendous ownership of this 160-year-old company. So we will invest in those internal capabilities. At the other extreme are collaborations, for example, iGate. And that's a really interesting novel antiphoresis technology that's going to bring compounds from earlier stage, and we're very excited about that collaboration with Stephen and his colleagues. And then at times we'll acquire. Obviously, B&L itself was an acquisition, but we recently announced Synergetics. And what's interesting about that is Synergetics we're ring-fencing the R&D capabilities, and they will actually be our center of excellence for innovating accessories and instruments. So it's really built around logic rather than dogma as we try to fulfill our responsibility to the eye health space, which we're absolutely committed to do.
Okay. And Naveed, last one, network product development is what you've called it at Santen. Can you describe what that means?
Yeah, it actually has been said quite nicely here as to we just refer to it as networked R&D, which means simply that there is good value and good technologies available outside. We can't do everything. We just formalize that and partner with people who can or who have a better edge over that technology. So we don't do everything in-house. We would like to share in the R&D with the folks who probably can do it better than we can do. We can do certain things better than other people, so we would like to take on that and bring our strength to the table. So it's basically a very formal way of identifying areas where we have excellence, and areas where we want to be, and areas where we don't have any excellence at all. And if there is an unmet need, real unmet need in those areas, we would be interested in all 3. And our participation in all 3 would be different then. If we have no expertise, it's a different set of tools that we would have to use. And if we have a lot of expertise, there would be a different kind of negotiation. So all 3 of them are options for us. We just want to make sure that we understand each one of them very well and not duplicate some, not reinvent the wheel, as they say. So that is what I think we call networked R&D.
All right, Jeff, Bill, and Brent. I'm going to let you fight over this one, and I'll let Bill, you tee this one up, and then I'll see how Jeff and Brent handle it. I showed you the dollars you spend, and one could sit there and say, if I was a shareholder, have they been efficient? So let's just say the challenge is that they haven't been as efficient as you can. Why doesn't you just let the smaller companies develop the products and you guys use your heavy cash flow to acquire them? Bill, if I didn't set you up perfectly, boy, I think you owe me dinner on this one.
Yeah, I've never understood why they would do internal R&D. You know, an observation I've made.
I hope you're being facetious, Bill.
Barely. An observation I've made through my career is that performance has a cycle as well, doesn't it? You know, each of us maybe gets it right a number of times and then we're off cycle for a while, et cetera. And I see top performing corporations, guess what? They don't have steady performance over decades at a time. There are some cycles, and we see that in R&D as well. And, you know, having been in a larger organization and in smaller organizations, they're different. Guess what? We don't have the depth and substance and resources in the smaller organizations. But guess what? If we have good people and we're candid with ourselves and we're adequately resourced, we can do a lot well, and we're probably a little more nimble. So we may have an advantage of not having as large an organization around us that needs to be nurtured and monitored and so forth. So I think there's not one right way to do it. I happen to love, you know, the startups, okay, and we try it, and we are relatively nimble. But unless the large organizations care about innovation and at least have some substantial commitment to it with a balance of internal and external, our model doesn't work either. So to me it's a partnership at some level.
Brent.
Yes, I was going to say, you know, look, take dry eye, obviously an area, a market that we helped create and have the only approved product in right now on the prescription side. You know, we have 5 programs at Allergan, active in development programs today in dry eye. 2 have been acquired from the outside, and 3 are internally derived programs. And so when you look at that portfolio, you know, to me it's pretty interesting. And what we did by doing the deal with one of your companies in dry eye was say, look, first, we have a lot of pharmaceuticals advancing for dry eye. We had 3 or 4 programs at the time that we were advancing. We didn't have a device. Electroceuticals, if you will, or electrostimulation was a really interesting area of science. Because we had the 3 programs and we had launched Restasis, we had a lot of expertise to evaluate dry eye. And I think our entrepreneur, Michael Ackerman from Oculu, who's now an employee of Allergan, is thriving inside of Allergan because we bought Oculi for a reason. It was an entrepreneurial company with an entrepreneurial spirit with a first-in-class entrepreneur. And so the last thing we wanted to do was assimilate that, right? We're not about assimilation. We basically left them alone, but then offered them all the resources of Allergan. I saw him last week, and he said it's going fantastic because he's learning how to do clinical development from the guys who do clinical development. And he's tapping in all the resources and scientists and the like. So, you know, that creates the environment for us to think both internally and externally and leverage the expertise we developed and the capabilities that we have in that category, but also open-minded enough to say, we have a gap. We don't know a lot about this stuff. We need an entrepreneur, and we need to go out and find it.
Jeff?
Yeah, I think, you know, as Brent said earlier, you know, we're relatively agnostic as well. We don't have all the best ideas, you know, certainly not. I mean, if I look, you know, in some areas, there's been terrific innovation within Alcon and surgical equipment with Centurion and the cataract refractive suite. I think that there hasn't been enough innovation on the ophthalmic pharmaceutical side from what I would like to see, you know, over the course of the past 10 years. So we're very open to, you know, whether it comes internal, external, I think matters less. I think ideally I'd probably like to see a 70-30, 60-40 split slated towards the internal development, just because I believe that's the core competency of Novartis. We're a science-based innovation company. If I look at, you know, our products today on the Novartis Pharma business, which is, I don't know, 32 billion, I believe well over half of that has originally been developed inside of our labs, and so we really do believe in the importance of applied research and translational research. And I think at the same time we're very committed to doing deals. I look at Alcon since last summer. We just signed another one today. We've done 11 deals. We've only announced 2 because I'm not really interested in sharing with Brent and Ari and everyone else what we're doing, but most of them hit 2018 to 2025. But I'm really excited about the innovation that we've done with a number of companies and are doing with a number of companies in this room, even though we haven't disclosed those publicly. Although, Bill, we did the deal with WaveTech that got fed it a little bit earlier today, and the Google stuff as well. But those are the only 2 we've announced. So I think a mix, really, at the end of the day, Jim, is important. And if you have a philosophy you're going to do everything else in-house, you're going to fail. Mm-hmm. If you have the philosophy that in-house doesn't matter at all, I don't know that that's a recipe for mid to long-term innovation either.
Okay, Ashley and Ludwin on this one. McKinsey found that the top innovative companies do a tremendous job of allocating their spend amongst the divisions with the ones that are the higher energy or higher performances. You kind of alluded to that a little, Ashley, in your first part, so I'm going to let you take that further. How do you see that in J&J? And you talked about you fighting for resources, but in order to keep J&J at the top tier, Alex and yourself have to manage that.
We were actually just talking about this yesterday. So, I would say what we try to do is really about balanced risk. So some of them have a lot higher risk, potentially better reward. Some of them are, closer to our wheelhouse, lower risk, better certainty, may not be as disruptive and may not be as transformational. Really what we had to do, and I know a lot of companies have quite frankly struggled this, particularly when, we're a diversified healthcare company. We've got consumer goods, we have medicines, we have OTC medicines, pharmaceuticals, as well as surgery. And is there a comparator, if you will, to manage the enterprise portfolio? And really what we identified, again, putting the risk portfolio aside, if you kind of come out from an unmet need and you come about it from the math of the unmet need with growth opportunities, and then again, that strategic fit and the degree of disruptions, it really can align any sector and any group.
Ludwin? Zeiss, how's it handle? How do you portfolio manage amongst the various entities you have?
Yep. For us, it's also looking at the opportunity. So we try to identify and quantify the opportunities in the market, understand the competitive situation, and then basically decide in which direction to go. And that is not a static decision. We also look at it how it evolves over time, and we might decide to change priorities and reorganize our resources. My experience actually is the most difficult thing in that context is to decide what not to do.
Yeah, that I would agree. Okay, Naveed and Ari, how do you balance the need to invest in basic science or translational research with the imperative of late-stage clinical development in your company? Naveed, go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So we have 2 categories, and they're aligned with our business strategy. So the first category is to meet with some of our needs. We have what we call best-in-class approach, and by that I mean we need good scientific data that addresses what I call disease drivers. And if those are validated in a clinical setting, then that becomes a best-in-class molecule. It doesn't matter which indication, which disease, the target has to be valid. And then the other side is the first-in-class approach, where things get a little murky and a little difficult to decide on the portfolio side. In those categories, science takes precedence in the first-in-class category, and is again, the science meaning, what I will call it again, what is driving the pathology underneath. And so that is very, very high focus for us. In the meantime, if all of those categories or decision points are met, then we can make a decision to go or not to go to phase 3. But we would like to have a good amount of certainty before we invest in phase 3 programs. And so the phase 2s and the early development with translational research and applied research becomes critical. And so at Santen, we have dedicated groups who are doing translational, who are dedicated to doing translational work, biomarkers, et cetera. And the job is to make, okay, and there's no, I mean, I'm not saying anything that most people here don't know, but the focus has to be that we must have a successful phase 3 program. And once all of those things line up, then it's time to really go for a large phase 3 registrational program, marketing authorization.
Ari?
Yeah, so obviously at BNL we're supportive of basic science, translational medicine, and I've certainly spent many years at McKinsey working in those areas, but that's not the focus of Bausch & Lomb. We're humble enough to know what skills we bring to the table, and those exist in areas like CMC, clinical, regulatory, and then obviously we believe our job is then to leverage the global capabilities of market preparation and launch, build to take all your little companies and hopefully pay you a lot of money and grow them across the world. That's really our approach. But more than that is the intent to make a difference. Again, this company is probably more than twice as old as anyone in this room, and our responsibility is to get up every day, be externally focused. We're in conversations with many colleagues in this room about innovative products and innovative devices, and that's what we try to do. Get up, make a difference, find those technologies, drive them through the market, through launch, and make them available, put them in the hands of our customers so that these doctors in turn can treat their patients.
Okay, Jeff and Brent, now I'm going to give you a little dose of reality here. You've talked with the group, you have done a tremendous job, I really appreciate your answers, but you have investors. So you're on your earnings call, and they sit there and they go, you've got that lovely pharmaceutical business, which with great profit margins and a long longevity of life, and you've got this medical device business. From a guy who spun from a pharma company based on that principle, how do you, at the end of the day, with your board, manage that pharma device? So Jeff, I'll let you go first on that one.
You know, look, I think that it's a good question, Jim. I think there are actually, pretty tremendous synergies in the field. When I think about ophthalmology, I came into this, industry only last April, and what I've been really impressed by is the view of ophthalmology as an integrated disease, and really looking at the entire patient continuum. So I think, it's hard to be successful if you're only in one area, because when I look at drug device combinations and what's coming in the future, that's going to be an increasingly important part of how innovation gets done, whether it's surgical glaucoma, and Brent talked about the Aquasys deal that they've done, whether it's on the retina side, even dry eye, right? I mean, I think the Oculeave acquisition that you guys made, is that right? Is also device for a disease that is treated with Restasis and other products for through pharma products. And so I think there are a tremendous amount of synergies. They're not always easy to quantify, because I think some of it's intangible, and they're different businesses. The cycle for medical devices is much faster. I mean, we've been able to rapidly accelerate our IOL development since last summer. It's going to take longer to work to accelerate our pharma pipeline. So I think they are fundamentally different business models, but there's a tremendous amount of customer overlap that I think is important. And I think the other thing that I would say is there's an advantage when you have scale. We were $11 billion in sales last year, and FX has been a big hit on all of our companies. But that gives us a lot of scale in the space where in eye care we're 3 times the size of the next competitor, and it allows us, I think, therefore, to have a footprint that we're able to be just broader in terms of our emerging markets presence as well.
Brent?
Yeah, so when I talk to our investors on the conference call, I've never been asked that question, so I don't know how I would answer it. No,
I'm giving you the chance to prepare for that.
I don't think they would ask the question. I mean, we have cut our teeth at Allergan on devices in our aesthetic medicine group, and we learned a lot about that. And in fairness, I learned a lot about it at Bausch & Lomb too, which is it doesn't matter if it's a pharmaceutical or a device. My goal is whatever vertical we're in, whether it be aesthetic medicine or CNS or GI or eye care, is how do we best service our customers and ultimately serve patients. And, if we go into a dermatologist's office or a plastic surgeon's office, it's about offering them a full range of opportunities to best service their customer or their patient. When I think about ophthalmology and eye care, Allergan didn't have much of a history in devices in that context, and we're starting to learn. we talked about dry eye doing oculi, but even in glaucoma, obviously we have lots of drops and we have lots of R&D in glaucoma. But we also had an internal program in bimatoprost SR, so dropless therapy for glaucoma. And then we went out and we were looking at the space, that people call MIGS, and really fell in love with Aquasys. And Ron Bach, another great entrepreneur, worked under you. I guess you taught somebody something.
Don't hold that against him.
Yeah, right. And Ron did a fabulous job with Aquasys, and it fit perfectly with our drops and our move to dropless therapy with bimatoprost SR, and then an external program from Aquasys. And we will finish that study with Ron and the pivotal study and hopefully get that approved here in the United States. It's already a CE marked. And, sell drugs and devices together, because that's what glaucoma specialists want. That's what ophthalmologists want. They want therapy to lower IOP and get patients to goal and compliance in glaucoma. It doesn't matter to me if it's a drug or a device.
Okay, Bill, here's your dose of reality. Company's been an R&D project, and now it's commercial. And now it actually has to continue to spend on R&D, but its commercial sales and marketing expenses take a bigger part of the picture. How do you ensure they don't lose that energy around R&D and cut that to ensure they're making the bottom line?
Well, it's hard. It's hard. But what I found is that as in a number of our companies, probably half or so of our projects, we need to go commercial to de-risk the commercial part. We can de-risk at the R&D level, but there's a lot of innovation that happens, among the group here and the private companies in the commercial stage, the learning and iterative process of getting it right commercially. And so I view that as R&D or innovation investment that can be classed, a little bit as R&D. And what I also find is that our organizations are so steeped and committed and knowledgeable around a space. MIGS might be a good example, where if you look at the pipeline that we've developed at Glaukos, it's now public, and so it's really pretty apparent. So we didn't have a first product that we were needing to commercialize and develop a market from scratch, and so it had to go from theory to reality. And while we were doing that, thankfully, we were able, through a scrappy, intelligent team, to have a couple of further generational products as well. So we have to hold ourselves accountable to keeping the R&D vibrant and nimble while we are in the early or not so early commercialization. And it's hard. Sometimes we're just under-resourced, and we get those tough decisions of what don't we do. Maybe we don't broadly commercialize. We do target commercialization because we just can't scale, that type of thing. So, yeah.
Ashley and Ludwin, I'm going to actually build on something that Ludwin was talking about. Ashley, I'll let you take it first. I think the toughest part in R&D is to fire an R&D project, right? Especially when you have a culture of creativity, as you all have illustrated. How do you do that at J&J? How do you fire that project?
You get pretty good at it. I think, listen, we are very much compelled towards patient needs, and as Brent mentioned, customers, and serve thy customer, and it cures all ills. And we have rigorous debate, but I think we're getting much better. I'd say versus 5 years ago and even 3 years ago. We just went through a whole strategic planning process yesterday on the innovation portfolio across the enterprise. And again, I think there's a more common language, a common set of criteria. So you can identify the gems much better now when you know the space, when you have domain expertise, which I think is a really important point listening to the debate of inside, outside, and it's really, search and develop. But I do worry about losing that secret sauce of mastery of next generation material science and next generation test methods and full speed automation. So I think it is a combination. But 30% every year has to go.
Ludwin?
Well, I think it needs a kind of a culture in the company to develop new ideas and also drive new ideas. And we try to create that kind of culture in our company so that new ideas come up and then also are developed with our people. So yeah, it needs that culture, and that culture needs to be supported in the company top down. It needs to go through all layers. Then of course you need an environment where things can really grow in the end.
Jim, if I could just add, our longtime head of R&D for Novartis Pharma, Jörg Reinhardt, who's now our chairman, did, in his inaugural chairman's address when he came back from having been CEO at Bayer, came back and he was looking at what are the underlying factors that make, companies truly innovative. And to your question, in this meta-analysis that he had showed us, the single most important factor in innovation was the ability to kill projects and the ability to take a decision of what not to do. And I think the principle of subtraction is incredibly important. If I look at, everyone talks about Apple as being an incredibly innovative company. If you look at what Steve Jobs did when he came back in his second incarnation in 97, 98, he dramatically streamlined and simplified, the product portfolio from 15 products down to 3 or 4. And I think there's learning for all of us in that.
Naveed and Ari, on this one, you've got you all have strong, powerful R&D people. If they weren't, they wouldn't be there. I've had the luxury of working with great R&D people. So they have a passion to their projects. You go out and acquire something that has somewhat of a similar nature to a project you're working on. How do you assimilate that external project into a project that's been already? And really, how do you encourage your R&D head not to have the not invented here syndrome?
Yeah, I mean, not made at Santen, it should not be a consideration. So I hope that when we went out and bought this, whatever asset that closely resembles something in the pipeline, I hope that decision was a correct one. So that it would start from that one, is that yes, we need something because it addresses an unmet need. And so therefore, making the case in-house, I would think would not be that difficult. And assigning resources would not be that difficult because if we did the homework right up front. And if we just went ahead and did it willy-nilly because somebody else did it, then it would be not even a bad thing for the business, it would be a bad thing for the R&D folks because they will be demoralized and not willing to, go the extra mile that we sometimes need them to go the extra mile. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's not solely an R&D issue. It has to do with decision making and then bringing it in. If it fits in very well and the data suggests that, or the investments, how much money needs to go to which project, means that the in-house project has to be stopped, then it has to be stopped. And I think there are two things that make a huge difference, at least to me. One is, what do I have in my portfolio? That's number one. Because sometimes if you don't have a good enough portfolio, you make excuses for the product that you're trying to work on. So if I have a reasonable portfolio, it makes decision-making easier on what to stop and what to continue. And the second thing is discipline. Is that if you have made a criteria, go, no go, you have to stick with it. And so between those two, I think we can accomplish what you just said. We can get something from the outside and develop it either in-house or take it to fruition and commercialize it.
Sure. Ari?
Yeah, I think the way we view this job is twofold. One is it's actually not invested in, quote, a head of R&D, but we bring more of a professional services approach to this, which is the best brains around the table, which includes all the GMs, it includes the scientists, and importantly includes people from outside. And it's the best idea wins. There's no pride of ownership of any idea. Point two is, rather than killing and which to kill, which is interesting, the way we view it is what's really important is where are we going to double down and really invest heavily against the assets and the programs on the table. And if I look at the latanoprostene Bunod, which we inherited through BNL, we've doubled down. We're working with KOLs, many of whom are in the audience, to bring that to market. It's under review with the FDA. Lumines, which is a novel low-dose bromonidine, is another example. Lots of input from consumer and pharma folks, and Vitesse, ultra-high-speed vitrectomy. Each of these programs got resources, doubled down on them to bring them forward, and a mix of internal and external expertise. So that's how we run our portfolio.
So I want to end with, I really want to thank this group. If you think about it, to get this type of caliber in one room here is really an extraordinary effort. And Gil and Emmett and Bill, thank you for that. But I want to thank this group very much for taking the time, especially at the end of the day. Let's give them a big round of applause. Thank you, group.